Hello and welcome to the 29th episode of Sparks. I am Deirdre Brennan, the Executive Director of RAILS, Reaching Across Illinois Library System. And we started this podcast many months ago now to discuss and debate potentially issues and trends in the library world. So my guest today is Lauren Rosenthal. She is the Executive Director of the Fox River Valley Public Library District. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So we're going to talk about data today, among other things, and telling the library story. Topics that I think are certainly very important, especially these days, and something that we're very interested in at RAILS. We've been, for the past couple of years, you probably know, we've had Grant Halter, our data analyst, on board, and he's made a tremendous difference in the way we look at our services and issues. And I know that you've been doing a lot with data and telling your story about different topics. So why don't you start by telling us what got you interested in this, and then we'll move on to some specific projects.
Okay. Well, one of the priorities that our board passed, the district priorities, is transparent governance and the ability to explain to the public what we're doing and why we're doing it. So when I first started here 7 years ago, I was tasked with creating a dashboard that we could then present to the board and explain, on a monthly basis, the things that we're already tabulating, the visits and circulations and things like that. But trying to present that in a way that was user-friendly and readable and usable proved to be much more complicated than anyone had thought. So we all started with Excel, right? We're all gathering this data. We all had it all in Excel, and we could check off the box that we were being transparent because we were reporting it. That's for sure. We were reporting all that data, and tons and tons of data, but it wasn't useful. There's no context to it. We couldn't use it to predict trends over time. We didn't know how that meant relative to anybody else, right? To say that we had 500,000 circulations, is that good? You need to be able to explain that. So we started then using IPLAR data to benchmark, circulations, and we would put that into taking that Excel and creating graphs with it. So then we could at least look at both our trends over time, monthly and annual statistics, and we could also, pulling out that IPLAR data, present the same thing, trends over time with other libraries of similar size, libraries located in our proximity, that sort of thing. So that was all very helpful too. But there were still PDFs, which again, I really felt like we're checking off a box. Yeah, we're reporting it, but it's not the same thing as telling the story, like RAILS is trying to highlight that, and that is so essential because that's the only thing that's really going to engage patrons in understanding what we're doing and then becoming advocates for us. So, I've been in search of a tool that would enable us to do that. I was happy to find this OpenGov product that did enable us to convert from stationary PDFs to interactive graphs that are on the library's website, so people can click through them and find out, if you want to see, this is our current visits this fiscal year. If you want to delve down more deeply, geez, what are our monthly visits every month since 2012? It's all on there. So now people can have fun playing with our data, both the board, which certainly has a good time with that, and the public as well, right? Because it's just there on a link directly from our library's homepage.
So this is the transparency dashboard, is that right? Yes. And so what is the board, what's their favorite thing to play with, do you think?
Of course, it depends on the board members, right?
Yeah,
we have a deeply fiscal conservative board member, which is, it's always helpful and keeps us on our toes. So For financial graphs, we have the current fiscal year, and we've broken out our spending by personnel, materials, operating, capital, building and maintenance. And so those are stacked bar graphs that show month-to-month trends. Then there's also the one that has the past 5 years. So the same aggregate 5 categories. And because, once you collect all this data, you can really go crazy with it. So it had to be simple enough that at first glance, you could achieve some context, some understanding right away. However, if you want to delve more deeply, you can click through those graphs and say, oh, okay, well, we've spent $350,000 on materials last year. How much of that was DVDs? Click right through and you can see that. So then you say, oh, well, how much were DVDs on a monthly basis? You can keep clicking through until you can see literally every check, not a copy of the check, but a copy of every payment that we've made for everything that the library has ever done. So for the board member, right, for the board member for whom fiscal transparency is very, very important, this is a great tool for him. And we have to remember when we have board members that they are representing the community. So just because there's one board member for whom these are the favorite graphs, there's a lot more members of the community for whom these are really, it's really pleasing to them that we are being as transparent as we are. There are no secrets here.
Yeah, I can.
But then of course, other board members, they want to know, what are we checking out? When are we checking it out? What's going on with COVID? What was going on pre-COVID? When we converted to auto renewals, how did that affect circulation, that kind of thing. Other board members are more interested in holdings. We report on percent of collection that's books versus electronic materials versus online materials. So we try to have a smattering out there for everyone.
So what's been the reaction from the community? I take it they're aware, they're pretty aware of it, use it. Yep.
Yes. And it's especially helpful on social media, right? Because social media can provide enormous positives for the library in our ability to get our story out and reach into communities that aren't necessarily coming through our doors. There can also be some confusion out there on what the library is doing, and this tool has been essential in getting out there whenever someone is on social media saying, oh, the library's a dinosaur, right? We've heard this, and we also know that that's not true. So being able to point to this, no, as a matter of fact, we are circulating 500,000 items, and there are more libraries than there are McDonald's, right? We need to be able to use these kind of tools to explain to the public, hey, libraries are more vital now than ever.
Did you find out anything that was surprising?
So yes, as a matter of fact, although, so we started with the transparency dashboard, but I love data, and I have long been a fan of the IPLAR data. And so I feel like the most beautiful thing of the IPLAR data is it's completely standardized, right? We are all answering these exact same questions. We're not trying to figure out how different things are reported in different ways. So we can do a giant data dump of all, at least I did a giant data dump of all Illinois libraries to just play with that data and see what I could find in there that would be helpful for us in telling our story and explaining how we fit relative to other libraries. So now I've created, in addition to this transparency dashboard, we've got an IPLAR dashboard of how we compare. We're looking at comparisons versus other libraries serving our same population. So I'm looking at a cohort group of 60,000 to 80,000 patrons. I'm comparing against libraries that receive similar property tax revenues, because I think that's something that the public is very interested in. So we're in the $3 to $3.5 million range of property tax revenues. And then I'm also using that to compare all libraries in my county, Kane County. And so my greatest surprise when I wanted to look at this IPLAR data is to see how big we are. Because we always have called ourselves the Little Dundee Library. And the library used to be called Dundee Township Public Library District.
Yeah.
When, because it started, as a township library, but we haven't been serving just Dundee Township for more than 40 years now. So we actually serve 1/3 of Rutland Township as well. So we expanded it, we changed the name to reflect that expansion back in, I think, 2012 to Fox River Valley Public Library District. So we, long-serving employees still sort of think of us as the Little Dundee Library. And the other reason I think why we perceive ourselves to be smaller is our largest border is with Gale Borden. So I wanted to use the IPLAR data and say, look, how big are we really? And I'm going to say, shocked to find that we're the 7th largest library district in the state of Illinois.
Wow.
By serving 70,000 people. Yes. So I thought, well, so we went, at the next staff meeting, we had a long conversation about positioning ourselves and making sure we're able to tell our story using this data, making clear, I don't ever want to hear Little Dundee Library again, right? We are the 7th largest library district in Illinois.
Right. So yeah, fascinating. And then you have a whole different, cohort to compare yourselves to in a different way.
Exactly. The other big surprise in that data was then I wanted to take it a step further and say, okay, I know we're big by population, but I know we're small by square footage. So then I looked at it and said, well, okay, if I look at square feet per capita, where do we rank in that same sort of cohort group? So 340 library districts in Illinois. And while we're 7th in population size, we are 320th in square feet per capita. So we're
That's right. That should certainly help your advocacy campaign for why you need more space. Yeah.
Nothing else. I want everyone to know that those figures. Yeah. Size, population size, and square feet per capita, not the same ranking.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So, well, see, that's the beauty of data. Obviously, is one of the beauties is that you really have to just get rid of all your assumptions, and and which is the Little Dundee Library that.
Exactly.
Well, Grant, excuse me, our data analyst, he says, you have to ask yourself the question, is the data interesting or is it useful? It's fine if it's interesting, that's all fine. Interesting is good. Telling the story, is all needs to be interesting, but it's the useful part that you need to go that next step and be sure that it really is useful in telling a useful story.
Right. Another thing, using this IPLAR data, it proved very useful recently for us. So the federal CARES Act money was sent out to all the counties, and in Kane County, they received $92 million. So the CARES Act allocation committee was determining how that money was going to be distributed. And their initial plan was to approve funds for park districts, forest preserves, and townships only. Library districts were not included in that allocation. And so I had already, put all this data together and decided we needed to plead the case for why library districts needed to be included, right? We all know that we have incurred great expense in setting up the buildings, right, for patron and staff safety, and beyond that, expanding services in this time of need. For instance, our library, we've served summer meals for kids for 4 years now, and every year we would serve about 1,500 meals over a 10-week period. And this year, because we couldn't serve in the building, we had curbside service, but we were allowed to do outreach into some apartment buildings that could use some extra help. So, we managed to take on that initiative this summer. And instead of 1,500 meals, we served 12,000 meals.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
Wow.
So extraordinary effort. However, getting 12,000 box meals into the building required an additional refrigerator, right? Coolers, ice packs. So, we had a lot of expenses on that. In addition, we have all the schools surrounding the Dundee Library in our district. They're all at 100% free and reduced price lunch. So there are folks that high-speed internet access in the home is just not something that they can do. So we've always had some hotspots, but we were really eager to be able to expand that program. So it was our hope that we could offer hotspots for semester-long checkout. But you have to have a good quantity of them to be able to do that. So these were all the things that we wanted to do, not budgeted, of course, but perfect for CARES Act funding. So coming back to data, Carol Metal and I attended the CARES Act Allocation Committee meeting and pled the case for why library districts needed to be included. But the first question that the committee asks is, well, I don't even know how many libraries there are in Kane County. I knew that, right? Because I'm thinking around with the IPLAR data. I said there are 12 libraries, public libraries in Kane County, 11 of which are library districts. They were not, the municipal libraries were taken care of by the village. So I mean, it was like a light bulb moment for them because they said, oh, we're only talking about 11, no problem. And they set aside $250,000 for Kane County Public Libraries. And happily on Friday, we received notice that we've been awarded almost $50,000 to cover all those initiatives.
That is fantastic, as you say.
It's essential.
Yeah.
Directors need to be facile with the data. You need to have it and you need to be able to use it.
Right. That's fantastic. So what about the long overdue project and survey? That I know you've been working on too. That's one of my favorites because so many understandable assumptions about fines and overdues and the amount of money that's you're losing potentially, or that's how patrons sort of manage their behavior, etc. And just the whole like social justice of it all. So
exactly.
Tell us about that project too. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so we're serving 70,000 patrons. That's over several villages, right? And there is a lot of economic disparity among the villages. So residents of some villages felt strongly that fines are a punitive necessity and work to keep people in line. And I understand that point. However, for people that for whom a $3 DVD fine is a real problem, it was unfair. The marginal cost of $3 to some families is much higher than it is to others. And so what we found in looking at the data of our patrons was that the communities that could afford it the least were the ones that lost their library cards because they couldn't afford to pay fines. You have a kid that gets sick and then you're a week late with your stuff, that hurts. And we did not feel that it was the library's role to inflict that pain. So we looked at the data from the existing fines and of course found that almost 1,000 of the blocked cards were patrons under the age of 18. So kids' cards, kids need to come into the library. So pulling together this data, we created this long overdue survey to make our case to the public on what the impact of fines was and what the impact would be if we were to eliminate them. And we had started, we're members of CCS, we had started automatic renewals the previous year. So because of that, fine revenue was not that much money anyway. I think some people have this idea that libraries are run by fines, which was never the case, not even close. So it's less than less than 0.5% of our revenues. So we made this case in this long overdue survey, and we were happy that 78% of respondents said eliminate those fines. And then I was delighted with our board, who were quick to take action. They said, done. It did not even, I was expecting it to be our first board meeting where we talked about it and then, hoping that a few months down the line they would go for it. And no, that one meeting was all it took. Said, oh, okay, we're ready to vote. And it was
Wow.
fantastic. I was delighted. Yeah,
That's
delighted.
tremendous. Yeah.
I'm going to give
Yeah.
a shout out to Sarah Murray at Algonquin Public Library, who I think they were the first that eliminated fines. And we do have a large border with Algonquin as well. So that helped to ease, you know, it was a shame that patrons would have to pay here and not right there. So this way we're equitable.
Yeah, I did read the, you know, some of the survey comments, and it's so interesting. And like you say, it's an understandable point of view about what you know, what people think fines do. But when you really, you know, get into the data, you find out what's the bad effect, and which is, I think, tremendous on kids, like you were saying. So yeah, that was very interesting, and I think it's really tremendous how it's kind of a wave that's gone through Illinois, that in terms of getting rid of fines.
Right.
And, yeah, I know that the some of the academic libraries in Carly are talking about it too, which
Excellent.
yeah, it's quite a different thing going on there in terms of you need to pay your fines to get your diploma, etc. So I think
when you've incurred all that college debt already,
right,
you're struggling, and in times of a bad economy
right,
where you might not have a job waiting for you, that's
right.
Why put additional burdens? Yeah.
So what else would you like to tell us today? Any advice for libraries who are just getting started?
As you mentioned with Grant, it's really important to be able to translate the data into the usefulness. Yeah, so that was really essential. We used the survey on long overdue fines. We also did a community survey on library expansion. So we talked about in 2016, we had this failed referendum. We worked for years to have, we had in-person surveys, we had over a course of several years, trying to ascertain where the community felt we ought to go. We're a very large district geographically as well as population, but we're very large west to east and relatively narrow north to south. So, and unfortunately, the Dundee Library, what you might call the main library, is on the far, far, far east side. I mean, like throw a stone and you're at the east side of the district. So patrons that live on the far west side, many of whom really do not even know that we're their library because it's so far away. They don't, and when you don't have your village's name in the name of the library, it's harder to make that clear. So. So yeah, we felt bad. How are we going to reach these patrons and make sure that they have a voice in what our expansion is going to be? So we did this community survey using the OpenGov tool for them as well, and talked about what our options might be. Are you interested in a 2-library district? Should we have a centrally located library? Should we, and of course, always ask the question: should we? Whatever we do, just don't touch my property tax bill, right? Option. And we were happy to find that the whatever you do, don't touch my property tax bill option was the least likely approved. So that was number 4 on the rankings. But they really wanted 2 libraries. But they did have an opportunity to map where they wanted the new location to be. This mapping feature was really cool. You could drop a pin, and then they also in the comments had an opportunity to get their voice heard. And it was pretty resounding that they'd like to use an existing building. So that there is the perception that this old building, whatever old building they're driving by and tired of driving by, should be turned into something vibrant like a library. So it's certainly our hope that at some point we're going to be able to do that.
Right.
For this district. So
you will, I'm sure of it. You got the data, right?
Exactly. We can certainly explain why it needs to happen.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us today.
Thank
really
you.
Interesting. Thanks for all the great info and stories. And I know that if people want to know more, if our listeners and watchers want to know more, which I imagine they will, they can get in touch with you at Fox River Valley, right?
And you can check out our dashboard on frvpld.info/dashboard.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dee. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much for listening to Sparks today. Sparks is produced by the Reaching Across Illinois Library System. If you would like to learn more about the show or share your feedback on the topics discussed, please visit railslibraries.info/sparks.